easy, for instance, than art, because I would compare mathematics and art on many aspects. But mathematics has a own language that needs to be somehow shared in order to enjoy this kind of discussion. But I think that many people would be surprised when hearing two mathematicians, that as I was doing with Alessio, and I'm doing also with Alessio, when they discuss about math, and they speak of living objects, not through formulas and I don't know, proofs with the ordered mathematics. It's more like a discussion where certain ideas emerge, and one looks at them from different point of views, and one compares the point of views, one disagrees a bit, and yeah, it's I see this as this sort of lively interaction.
Yeah.
So,
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One of my colleagues says, in order to be a great mathematician, it's not enough to, it's necessary but not sufficient to be intelligent and to work hard. These abstract concepts also have to take on a life for you, because otherwise you couldn't care about them enough to do anything with them. So they have to have a reality, and they don't for everyone. But why is it a romantic subject? One of the things is the time scale. We have these problems that have been open for, in some cases, hundreds of years. And I was very excited when I was a PhD student, and Fermat's last theorem was finally proved by Andrew Wiles, because you had the sense that maybe if Fermat and nobody else could do it after 200 years, it just wasn't within the realm of something that humans could do. But in fact, what you see is that everyone has made progress, and people learn from what others have done before them. And actually, the generation time in mathematics is less than the generation time of humans. So, Alessio is, I think, 8 years younger than Cedric in Fields Medal age, and maybe in PhD age as well, or maybe 12 years. Maybe I don't have it quite right, but 10 years, something like that. So the generation time is short, so we can actually progress more quickly in mathematics than maybe in some other aspects of human life. And I also wanted to touch on, well, I had this experience myself when I was a high school student. I was doing computer programming competitions, and I had a machine, a Commodore 64, that most of you are not old enough to remember, but I knew the machine inside out. And then when I got to university, I was studying engineering. The faculty required me to buy an IBM PC, and all of a sudden, all of this arcane knowledge I had about how the Commodore 64 was wired became completely irrelevant. And I swore never again would I make that investment in knowledge that was going to become completely irrelevant. And so, if you're a lawyer or something, the laws can change. If you're a tax specialist, but in mathematics, once something has been established, it stays true for a long time. And I also think that that's one of the things that mathematics can offer to society. So on the one hand, mathematics is a kind of superpower that allows us to do experiments in areas that we can't access in other ways. So we understand that the universe started in a Big Bang because we can solve a mathematical equation that predicts a singularity. And maybe for COVID, there are experiments you can do using statistics to tease out information that we wouldn't have any other access to, or models, mathematical models. But the other thing that mathematics can offer to people in an era where fake news has become a big problem, and probably we all need to do a better job of communicating this to our students, is we have a method for deciding whether something is correct or not, and for evaluating information and thinking critically. And I think that's really an important thing that mathematics has to offer to society.
Alessio, I'm going to come to you actually first on the point about beauty and finding it a romantic subject. But I think another thing that is a commonplace in terms of public perceptions of mathematics is this idea that people do their best maths when they're young. And indeed, you have to be under 40 years old to win a Fields Medal. I wonder what your thoughts are on why that is said of mathematics and not of other subjects, and also whether you think it's true. I mean, you've got your Fields Medal now. What are your thoughts about the best work when you're young?
Yeah, so of course there is a very beautiful romantic image, right, about this idea, and it comes from nice also stories, which probably on the one hand are beautiful, like Galois, who did fantastic mathematics, and then he died extremely young in a romantic duel. So fantastic.
In a duel.
Yeah, in a duel. So I mean, even better, right? But then it's also damaging because it gives the wrong image. Reality is that is not true. I mean, we have tons of counterexamples to these statements. Reality is that you do mathematics until the end of your life, and there are many mathematicians have done fantastic contributions, and they were way above, 50, 60, whatever, right? I mean, you can really do a lot of stuff. Maybe when you're young, there are two advantages. On the one hand, you have more energies, and probably you're more ignorant, which sometimes can help, because
Oh, yes.
the less you know, sometimes it helps, because you're not distracted by work that other people do in the wrong direction. But I think this is still a minority of cases. If we really do, a lot of advancement, there is, or especially now, mathematics has become so complex, and there are so many things that happen all the time, that experience plays also a huge role. So the more time, the older you grow, the more mathematics you know, the more connection you can make, the more you have seen, the more you can still do. So I think it doesn't work anymore like that. And also we see that mathematics, as we also discussed at the very beginning when you asked to Maria, right? It's not a work of lonely people. I mean, it's done through collaborations. So even in collaborations, maybe there are younger and older people, but they all contribute one way or another. So I don't know. If one looks at even at the story of the Fields Medal, it was never meant really to be a prize under 40 because they thought that under 40 was the age limit to do mathematics. It was other historical reason, but it's nice to tell it like that, right? It's more, it's a better story, I think, but I don't think it's true.
Okay, so good days ahead. Good days ahead, Alessio, for you.
Yeah, still.
Cedric, did you want to jump in?
Well, it's true. The Fields Medal at the beginning was meant to be prized for the young mathematicians, was not supposed to be seen as it has become. But it was from the beginning, it came from the beginning with the goal to reward young mathematicians and to be part of the community of mathematicians. That's a big difference between Fields Medal and Nobel Prize. First is the age limit, so reward the young people. Second is the fact that it's at the same time of the International Congress of Mathematicians, and it's awarded by the International Union of Mathematics, which is like democratic emanation of all the mathematicians worldwide. So it's in the name of the mathematical community and in front of the mathematical community. A little, like the local adaptation of by the people, for the people, in the name of the people. And that's very democratic. In that sense, it's not the same as a prize awarded by an academy, as is the Nobel Prize. The age and I think the discussion about the age, the discussion about the way mathematics being done cannot be separated from the discussion on art and beauty that Anna, you started, and on which you yourself wrote some papers and books. And we know that mathematics, the form is very much important, the format, the way you prove things, not just what you prove, the style, because you're all working on the reasoning. That's the basic thing, that the stuff that you are working on, and the reasoning has to be sharp, it has to be elegant, it has to be powerful, and you cannot work with the reasoning without some aesthetic sense. You need it. We all mathematicians know we need the aesthetic sense to guide us, like the lamp in the dark. Otherwise, we would be completely lost in the ocean of possibilities. A physicist has experiments to find his way or her way and separate what is impossible from what is possible. In mathematical reasoning, there are so many possibilities that you need some way to guide and eliminate the ugly, keep the beautiful.
Except that there are occasions when beauty is not the best guide. There are occasions when ugly wins, right?
That is correct, but at least you've tried. And the sense of what is ugly and what is beautiful can change from decade to decade or from century to century. It's a cultural construction. But also, there was a time in which proofs based on axiom of choice, very abstract, were found very elegant. Now we found that it's cheating, and many mathematicians prefer to use constructive proof, and the beauty is in the construction. To talk about Alessio's work, a lot of the power of Alessio, often in many papers, is the possibility to build on very simple observations and very elementary tools. So there were some papers that I know, or some situations that I knew, in which a big hammer had been used to produce a theorem, and in which Alessio and collaborators were able to prove stronger results for more elementary techniques, like fine knitting. And that also, what is beautiful, what is not, it depends on your taste and on the evolution. But you always need this thing. And sometimes, of course, you may end up using brute force for some problems. But even the most ugly of papers, you have to find it has to have some beautiful idea in it. Otherwise, it cannot be good.
Nothing. It's true. Let's come on to that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Maria. Go ahead.
Can interact on this. I was also always very impressed, since we are speaking also of other people's work on, and so it's true, the mathematics builds on thousands of years of discoveries and ideas that a person needs to master. And one thing that really impressed me when I met scientifically Alessio was the fact that he was building his own intuition of very classical. He would never be satisfied by an answer like, this was said in that paper. And his next question would be, yeah, and why? Or maybe not needing for an entire proof, but at least an intuition of what's going on, of the interesting example there, of the situation where there was a real progress in that certain paper. So he has this living way of interpreting what was done before, and very original. And I think that was also somehow the starting point of some of his work, some new ways of looking at things that were solved maybe in an uglier way before.
And sometimes it's better to have a beautiful false idea of why something is true than a true ugly argument. And sometimes even you can make it in the proofs. I remember in some of my talks writing some things like, okay, for the sequel of the argument, let's assume that that space is bounded. Of course, I was working in Euclidean space, so it was obviously false, but it allowed to do with this false premise. There was a very beautiful, simple argument. And of course, the true argument has to be more complicated. But if you are able to give a hint of what's the idea, the reason for some result, then it's good. And that's really a thing of the mathematical culture, how we think of mathematics in the same way. To speak rigorously, there's no such thing as an important fact and a non-important fact. If you are in a proof, it all has to be true and all has to be good, and your computer will not accept the program if there is one bug, and your proof will not be true if there is one bug. But we all know in mathematics that we think of some arguments being more important than others, some steps being more crucial than others, and that's the way we organize our thinking of the proof.
Let me come to you, Alessia, because your colleagues have said some really lovely things about the elegance of your work. But I can imagine that when you are doing it forwards, when you're sort of living through it, the path that isn't always necessarily that clear. Because we had a question that came in from Michael from a Toronto-based high school, who said that many students don't know what to do when faced with a problem I've not taught them how to solve, and very quickly give up. What do you do when you're stuck, and what helps you persevere? How do you find that elegant path, Alessio?
Okay, so let's see. So we start maybe from the question, really, from the student, right? Because I remember myself when I started to see as a high school student problems from the Math Olympiads. They really had no clue how to solve them. And what they did was very, the only thing I could do was, since I don't know how to solve it, let's look for the solution. I mean, like they've written, someone posted it online, whatever. Let's read the solution. And then I say, then by reading the solution, I see how someone else did it. And then I go to the next problem, which will be maybe similar to it. And because I read the solution, the problem is really not the same, but it has some similarities. I have a chance to do something. And you go on like this for quite some time. And I remember maybe the first 10 problems, I could not solve none of them, but just I was trying every time to say, okay, let's see if what I just learned from the previous proof can help me now. And one thing where one has to be persistent is to stay in front of a problem for quite some time and just try whatever possible computation, whatever crazy idea, even if it doesn't bring anywhere, because it's only by spending time that then you can really also learn the proofs later. So, by reading only once, it enters, it goes out. If you spend a lot of time and then you read the proofs, you're like, that was the idea. But you see where it is because you spend so much time with your brain on it. And so that was the path for me to start to do some basic proof in exercises. Then when I went on as a mathematician, the point is mathematics is that the point is that no one tells you really what you have to do, because it's not like solve this problem and you already know that there is an answer. So you also have to come up with a question and the answer at the same time. And of course, the goal is to make the answer as the best possible answer you can give to a problem. Now, the one thing that I always tried was to, as also Cedric mentioned, you have first to simplify the problem as much as possible. So start from the very simple example. You want to prove something, put yourself in the simplest possible situation and ask yourself, how would I prove it in this case? And then add difficulties on and on. You start to add, to make the problem more complex, add more difficult situations. So you are free to add the assumptions sometimes and see, okay, but if I had this extra assumption, would I be able to solve it? And that's the way, right? So you build intuition, and maybe I think we are very much inspired by other people. I remember when I was even a first-year student, and that's probably also one of the reason probably I then pursued math analysis. I was very much inspired by my analysis professor in Pisa, Giovanni Alberti, because he would come to the class and teach us some analysis 1, analysis 2 theorem, and he would say, okay, today the proof is really ugly. So if I give you the proof, you will not understand why the result is true. So today I will give you a false proof of the theorem, but this will give you the idea of the result. And tomorrow we do the real rigorous proof. And I loved it. I mean, because really you get the idea and then you can do the proof. So it's a two-step process and you need both of them. You need the technique, and the only way to build technique is really to do it many, many times. It's just, machinery. And the same way you learn how to write, you learn how to prove mathematical theorems, you just need exercise. But the fact that you're able to do this abstraction and really understand the core, where is the key point, why something can be true even, there you need to also do sometimes a bit of false proof, because that's the only way to grasp if something makes sense. So, we have to learn from everyone. And so that's my strategy. I think everyone has his own way of doing mathematics. There is no universal way. There is no good way. I think we need each of us needs to find its own way. But one reality is that we need to work. I mean, there is no cheap solution, and do a lot of exercises and train ourselves on problems. There is no, as I say, magical answer coming from up.
Yeah.
So I always tell my students that you learn more by working out the details for the problem that you can actually solve than by banging your head against the one that you can't solve. So I'm a very strong believer in analogy. So if you're working on a problem that's too hard, try to find an analogous problem that's easier to solve and solve that first. And then find another problem that's analogous, maybe in a different way, and solve that problem. And then go back and try to put them together and solve the hard problem.
How do you shield against discouragement, though? I mean, what you're describing I mean, works well for things where you know there's an answer, but there are occasions when you are where you don't know necessarily if what you're trying to achieve is even possible. How do you shield against discouragement in that situation, Robert?
How do I shield against? Well, sometimes the analogous problem turns out to be interesting by itself. So sometimes you have to give up on the original problem and do something else. So Terry Tao has better advice than I do in this respect. Terry Tao says, if one problem is not working, work on have several projects going at once. And if you're not motivated to work on one of them, work on a different one. Or prepare your next lecture or write a letter of reference.
It's completely true. And of course, when it's Terry Tao, we know he works on 100 problems at the same time. But just having a few going on at the same time is indeed a good recipe. And to share, at some periods in my career in which I found myself like losing motivation, which is the worst problem for a researcher, I regained the motivation each time by working on a book or course or synthesis. And it was in particular the beginning of my book on my optimal transport, old and new book. I started it at a time in which I was rather discouraged, and when I ended writing the book, I was on the contrary very much excited about all the beautiful things that they were remaining to discover.
Maria, sorry, I just want to bring Maria in on this. Do you have periods where you feel very discouraged too?
Okay, so the first thing I have to say is that if I have to quantify, I think roughly 90% of my time goes on something that in the end, on which in the end, maybe I give up or so. So, I mean, it's a very common feeling. What to do? Well, I don't know. I don't have a recipe for sure. The other people have more experience on this. Maybe one thing I noticed is that sometimes working hard on something, I learn ideas that then after a month, a year or whatever, come into the game again because it's something that really became mine. So sometimes, even though something doesn't come, I try to write down what I got, the reasons why some attempts that I were doing could not go through, and and luckily this is. I mean, often we can get really maybe we cannot get a full proof of something, but we can get a feeling of why a certain idea could go, cannot go, or what is the boundary of it, what maybe even in a vague way, what else could be an ingredient that could help in that, so that this points in another direction that makes me start the day after, I don't know, reading something or studying. So I don't know, it's a complicated dynamics for me.
Robert,
maybe if I just
nodding enthusiastically during that. But I also wanted to say, actually, Robert, you earlier on, you said that it was necessary but not sufficient for a student to be intelligent to be a mathematician. I just wonder whether, to add to that, and alongside this idea of dealing well with frustration during research, do you think that being a research mathematician requires a kind of aptitude that can't be taught? Do you think that you need to be born with a gift for it?
I think it helps.
There are many ways to be a good mathematician. I remember how much I was impressed by Pierre Williams when I started working with him and could see his amazing speed and power on problems, and thinking, okay, this type of level is not for me because my intrinsic capacities in thinking are not at the same level. The speed is not the same, and so on. It took me many years to understand that power and speed of the thinking is just one element, but there are many skills and ways in which your mathematical career can go on. And the ability to find the right collaborators, to find the right subject, to ask the right question, to be in the right place at the right moment, and I cannot say more to describe it, are at least as important.
Robert?
So let's see. I'm not sure. But I started out thinking that I was going to study engineering, and then I went to university, and there were a lot of courses to take, a lot of labs to take, and I found myself not very motivated. And when I started skipping even my math and physics classes or sleeping through them, I knew that something was wrong, and so I switched to physics. And then in my second year, I switched to mathematical physics. And then in my third year, in order to get a degree with physics in it, you needed to do a general lab course. But I was busy producing musicals at the time. And so I decided to put off the lab course until my fourth year. And when I dropped an advanced mechanics course, it became clear that I was going to get a degree in mathematics. And I somehow followed my nose. I think Alessio said it was natural to do the master's after the bachelor's and the PhD after. So I somehow, my father, when he told me how he decided to become an optometrist, and he said, it was after the war and I wasn't a young man anymore, so I looked around for a field that would provide an adequate income that wouldn't take too long to learn and would provide an adequate income when it was done. And optometry was only 3 years instead of 4. And so this kind of thinking practical thinking played no effect on my career choice. Maybe it should have played more of an effect. On the other hand, I also learned that when I was in grade 1 or 2, my principal advanced me from grade 1 to grade 2 in the same year, and he told my parents at that time that I would become a mathematician, and this was something that they never shared with me until I'd completed a PhD in mathematics. So I think there can be some initial aptitude, but you also have to follow it up and develop it. So you need aptitude and you need hard work.
And on that idea then, Alessio, I think we will leave the final question to you. On that idea of everything that we've talked about being stuck, about elegance, about having natural aptitude, but that being a number of different ways that you could be talented. What single piece of advice would you give if you could go back and talk to your 17-year-old self? What single piece of advice would you give yourself, or perhaps more generally to young students who one day dream of becoming a Fields Medal winner, a professional mathematician? What's your advice?
Maybe the first advice is don't start by thinking that you have to win something big, because it will put too much pressure. I never thought about it, and I think that was good. So the first point is follow the passion, I think. So, I did mathematics. It became immediately a passion for me, something that I really loved. I enjoyed doing it. And so going to university, going to class was a pleasure. Was not like, going to school and you have to do your homework. It's really something you are happy to learn. And then everything becomes easier and everything becomes much more natural. Then, of course, the mistake that some people do, when you're skilled in something, you believe it can help you throughout your life, and that's wrong. So never trust that much your skills. You have to train them, as every professional does. Even the most talented soccer players, they have to train all the time. So that's important. So go on, follow your path, follow your passion, train for, and try to achieve the best you can. So I think that's also what I always tried. And, I met many mentors in my life that have been inspiring me one way or another. And there was one professor I met when I was very young, and he told me, okay, with you, what I realized that if I raise a bit the bar, then you are able, after some time, to always jump the bar. And I still don't know, where is your bar? He was telling me that when I was 18, 19. So I kept this attitude. I put a bar which is higher than I am, and I try to jump it. But I don't ask myself, where is the last one? So I kept going on and just trying to do the best I could. And when I entered Scuola Normale, I thought I started and I felt I was the last one of my class. And I just thought, okay, maybe I will be kicked out, because students are kicked out of Scuola Normale. Statistically, at least 1 or 2 mathematicians. So maybe it's me, because I feel the last one. But I thought, if I have to be kicked out, I have to do the best I can for this not to happen. Then, if that's what it is, one has to be realistic, right? I still made it to enter. We were only 10, so it was still a success. So I just try to always do my best. And that's, I think, what people should do. Do your best, try to achieve as much as you can in life. And also, you have to remember, we're not made of one thing, right? It's not because, we make a big success in one field like mathematics. This means that we are a great person. Maybe there are mathematicians that are better than me, I don't expect to be the best in anything, but I think as a persons, we are made of many things, right? We are human beings. We are made of, personal relationship, and we are much more complex than just being a mathematician. So, maybe there is someone who is better than me in something, and maybe I'm better than that person in something else. So that's a message in life, right? In everything, we just have to do the best we can in life. And just to conclude about thinking about Fields Medal, one person to blame for putting pressure on me is Cedric. Because in 2010, when he got the medal, he looked at me and he told me, and I never thought about Fields Medal before, he told me, oh, it was really a lot of pressure for me because 2010 was my last chance. This was, for Cedric was his last chance. And then he told me, never get into that position. So just get the medal in 2018 because it will be too stressful to try to get into 2022. So that's what he told me in 2010. He told me exactly that. You have to get it in 2018. So, but besides that,
you see how Alessio followed my advice.
I always follow.
It's true.
Advice.
Good
always follow the
advisor.
advice.
There we go.
Especially
two key thoughts to end on. Be the best person you can be and follow Cedric Villani's advice. I think we will leave that there. All that remains is to thank my wonderful panel, Robert, Maria, Cedric, and of course, Alessio. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Hannah, Alessio, and all the panelists and the audience for that very lively discussion, which gave us all some insights into how mathematics is done. I want to round out the event by inviting several leaders in science policy and in the communication of science to share their thoughts with us. Their ideas on the importance of advancing the study of mathematics, as well as the communication of mathematics, fit into the themes we have been discussing. Professor Alejandro Adem is the president of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. He's also professor of mathematics at the University of British Columbia and has published more than 70 papers in algebraic topology and group cohomology. Prior to assuming the presidency at NSERC, Alejandro served